It started with a quiet morning at the International Spaceport. The air buzzed with excitement, the kind that makes people forget sleep and hunger. Across every screen on Earth, one image kept flashing, the shining white body of a new ship named Odyssey. It wasn't just a ship. It was a dream built by the whole world. For the first time, every major nation had worked together to send humans beyond the solar system. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and a few security officers stood ready inside, their faces filled with both fear and pride. The launch was more than a mission. It was a promise. Humanity had fought wars, survived disasters, and healed from centuries of division. This voyage was proof that they could reach for the stars without destroying each other first. Children in classrooms waved flags, families crowded rooftops, and every eye watched the countdown tick down. When the engines finally roared to life, the ground shook and a cheer rolled across continents. People hugged strangers. Tears flowed freely. Earth had sent its best into the unknown. Inside the Odyssey, the crew moved with calm precision. They had trained for years, learning how to fix engines in zero gravity, how to farm food inside sealed domes, and how to talk each other through loneliness. The ship's corridors smelled faintly of metal and clean air, and its walls glowed with soft blue lights. The captain's voice came through the intercom, steady and kind. "We sail for all humankind," he said, before the ship disappeared into the black. Days turned into weeks as they moved beyond the comfort of the solar system. The sun became just another bright dot behind them, and the stars grew sharper, colder. The crew worked in shifts, maintaining the reactors, studying distant signals, and sending daily updates back home. Life aboard became routine. Morning coffee floating in bubbles, exercise in tight rooms, quiet laughter during meal hours. They were alone but not lonely. The thought of billions watching over them gave every heartbeat a sense of purpose. One evening, a soft alarm echoed through the control room. It wasn't danger, just a strange reading on the long-range sensors. A rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat was coming from a distant region of space. The scientists thought it might be a natural phenomenon, some kind of pulsar or energy fluctuation. Still, there was something oddly deliberate about it. The signal repeated every 47 seconds with perfect precision. Curiosity won, as it always does with humans. The crew decided to follow the source. The course adjustment took several hours. Outside the viewing ports, space looked peaceful, but the deeper they went, the stranger the stars appeared. Some flickered like dying candles, others stretched like thin threads of light. It was beautiful but eerie too, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The youngest technician whispered, half-jokingly, "Feels like someone's watching us." The captain smiled but didn't answer. He had felt the same unease since the signal appeared. After 3 more days of travel, the signal grew stronger, so strong it began to interfere with the ship's communications. Screens flickered. The ship's AI announced minor power fluctuations. Nothing dangerous yet, but enough to make everyone tense. The captain ordered a full scan of the region. That's when they saw it, a cluster of objects ahead, floating still and silent. They weren't asteroids. Their shapes were too clean, too symmetrical, metallic, artificial. The crew gathered at the main window, eyes wide. Could it be another civilization? One whispered. For centuries, people had dreamed of this moment, the first contact with alien life. Some smiled in disbelief, others prayed softly. The captain stood there quietly, watching the shapes drift in the starlight. He didn't speak until he was sure his voice wouldn't shake. "Let's make history," he said, and gave the order to open communications. The first message they sent was simple, a friendly greeting, translated into mathematical patterns and light pulses. No answer came. They sent again, then again. Silence. The ship's external cameras zoomed closer, revealing markings on the largest structure, patterns that looked almost like writing. The signal they had been following was coming from there, pulsing in the same steady rhythm. It didn't look like a trap. It looked like an invitation. Hours passed and nothing happened. The crew decided to move closer, careful and slow. They activated shields just in case and kept their sensors running at full power. As they drifted within a few kilometers, one of the objects suddenly moved. It turned, deliberate, graceful, and a light glimmered from its surface. It was watching them. A strange sound filled the Odyssey's control room, a vibration that wasn't exactly noise, but more like pressure against the mind. The ship's communication systems came alive with symbols none of the translators could recognize. It wasn't a language humans could understand, but it carried emotion, warning perhaps, or disbelief. The scientists scrambled to interpret it while the captain calmly sent another message of peace. Human research vessel Odyssey. We come without weapons. We seek only knowledge. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the signal changed. It grew louder, sharper, and more aggressive. The ship's system started to flicker, lights dimming one by one. The crew stared at the monitors as new shapes appeared on radar. 5, 10, 20 unidentified crafts surrounding them like wolves circling prey. The captain called for evasive maneuvers, but before they could react, a beam of light struck the ship's shields. The impact wasn't strong enough to destroy them, but it made the deck tremble. The message was clear. The humans had crossed into someone else's territory. Inside the ship, fear began to ripple. The communication screens filled with unreadable text, faster and faster. The chief engineer yelled from across the room that the alien signal was trying to override their systems. The captain ordered the signal cut, and the ship powered down its transmitters. For a moment, everything went dark except for the faint glow of emergency lights. When power returned, the alien crafts were still there, silent, watching. Then, without warning, a new message appeared on the central screen. It had been translated by the ship's AI, broken but understandable enough. Leave our space, or be erased. The captain's hands tightened on the console. He wasn't a soldier. None of them were. They were explorers, dreamers, scientists. The idea of battle felt absurd, impossible. He took a deep breath and responded with steady words. We mean no harm. We are leaving. He gave the order to turn the ship around. As the engines began to warm, the crew felt the tension ease slightly. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding. Perhaps the aliens would let them go. The captain allowed himself a brief moment of relief, until the proximity alarm screamed again. A sudden flash filled the window. One of the alien crafts had fired. The Odyssey lurched violently. People fell, alarms blared, and sparks shot from control panels. The outer hull groaned like a wounded animal. The captain shouted for damage reports, but half the communication lines were dead. Through the window, they saw another burst of light. Another strike. The shields held for a moment, then cracked under the next blow. The scientist at the radar whispered, "They're not warning us anymore." The captain's voice trembled for the first time. "Send everything to Earth now." The communications officer began transmitting, her hands shaking as she activated the emergency beacon. A stream of live footage, sensor data, and desperate voices traveled across space, toward the blue planet that had once waved them goodbye. In the middle of chaos, one crew member looked out at the endless dark and said softly, "Why would anyone attack explorers?" No one answered. The lights flickered again, and for a few seconds, the ship floated in silence, drifting between life and death. Far behind them, the signal left the Odyssey, racing toward Earth. 22 minutes later, it would reach home. And when it did, it would change everything. The attack on the Odyssey did not end quickly. It came like a storm that refused to fade. Inside the ship, everything was shaking. Sparks burst from the ceiling. Smoke filled the corridors. Crew members shouted over the roar of alarms, trying to reach their stations. The artificial gravity flickered, sending tools and personal items floating mid-air. Somewhere in the distance, metal screamed as another blast struck the hull. It felt like the entire ship was groaning in pain. The captain's voice echoed through the speakers, calm but firm. "All hands, emergency procedures. Seal every section that's losing pressure." People moved fast, their faces pale but determined. They weren't soldiers, yet in that moment everyone fought like one. Engineers tried to keep the main reactor stable. Medical officers rushed toward the wounded. Sparks flew across the control panels and the lights dimmed to red. The Odyssey had become a battlefield, though no one had ever wanted it to be. Outside, the attackers kept circling. Their ships were small, sharp, and moved with impossible speed. They fired in bursts of light, tearing through the void like silent lightning. The crew couldn't understand what they wanted. They had already tried to leave. They had shown no signs of threat. Still, the aliens kept firing as if their only goal was to destroy. It wasn't war. It was punishment. Inside the control room, the captain gave the order to activate the defensive shields again. The technician shouted that power reserves were falling fast. The ship was bleeding energy. They had to make a choice, protect the crew or power the engines to escape. The captain chose life. Divert power to shields, he said. The engines dimmed, but the barrier around the ship brightened once more. The attack slowed. The alien craft circled but did not shoot again. Maybe they thought the humans were finished. Maybe they wanted to watch them struggle. For a brief moment, the ship floated quietly. The crew took shallow breaths, listening to the hum of machines trying to hold everything together. A young engineer wiped sweat from his forehead. They stopped, he whispered, as if afraid that speaking too loud would start the firing again. The captain's gaze stayed on the screen. "Don't trust it," he said softly. He had seen something in the pattern of the enemy movement, something too precise to be random. They weren't leaving. They were studying, then without warning the signal returned. The same strange pulse that had first drawn them here now filled every speaker on the ship. Only this time it was faster, louder, more chaotic. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a message filled with fury. The ship's computers struggled to process the data. Symbols flooded the screens. Lines of alien code that seemed almost alive. The communication officer tried to decode it, but the system froze. The lights flickered again, and one by one every monitor went black. For a few seconds the only sound was the slow hum of the backup power. Then came the sound that made everyone freeze, a metallic thunk from outside the hull. It wasn't a weapon blast. It was a landing. Something had attached itself to the ship. The security team ran toward the airlock, their hearts pounding. Through the small observation window they saw it, a dark insect-like craft clinging to the ship's outer surface. It was cutting through the hull, sparks flying into the vacuum of space. No one spoke. They just stared, realizing what was happening. The aliens weren't just attacking from afar. They were coming inside. The captain ordered everyone to fall back to the intersections of the ship. "Seal every door behind you," he said. The ship's corridors echoed with the hiss of locking panels. People ran through the narrow hallways carrying emergency supplies, helping the injured, guiding those who couldn't walk. Behind them, the lights flickered again. The air felt thicker, heavier. Fear had a weight. Inside the control room, one of the scientists whispered, "We can't fight them. We don't even understand them." The captain turned, his eyes calm but fierce. "Then we survive. That's what humans do best." Outside the viewing port, strange shapes began to move in the darkness. The alien boarding craft pulsed with faint blue light. The moment it cut through the hull, all internal systems went wild. Doors unlocking, lights flashing, the ship's AI stuttering. It was as if something was crawling through the wires themselves. The crew fought to keep control, manually shutting down systems, rerouting power, doing whatever they could to stop the invasion. Then the emergency beacon light turned green. Against all odds, the transmission had gone through. The distress signal had left the ship and was racing toward Earth at the speed of light. Someone shouted, "The message is out!" For a heartbeat, hope flickered in their eyes. Even if they didn't make it, Earth would know. Someone would hear their story. But the relief was short-lived. Another blast hit the ship's lower decks. The floor shook so hard that everyone stumbled. Panels tore off the walls. The sound of breaking metal filled the air. A burst of flame erupted from one of the vents and smoke flooded the control room. People coughed, trying to see through the haze. The captain grabbed the emergency mask and shouted for everyone to stay together. The Odyssey was dying piece by piece. The ship's main reactor began to overheat. Warning lights flashed red across every screen. If it went critical, there would be nothing left to save. The captain called for the engineering team. They had to cool it down manually. It was dangerous, but there was no other choice. 2 volunteers rushed to the lower decks, fighting through debris and smoke. They moved like ghosts through a graveyard of broken machines, guided only by flashing lights and the sound of their own breathing. When they reached the reactor room, it was chaos. Wires sparking, coolant leaking, alarms screaming. They worked with trembling hands, trying to stabilize the system. Back in the control room, the radar showed more alien ships arriving. Dozens now. They surrounded the Odyssey completely, forming a circle like predators closing in on wounded prey. The captain realized they were trapped. Even if they repaired the engines, there was nowhere to run. Still, no one gave up. Every person aboard the Odyssey kept working. They patched broken circuits, treated the wounded, and sent one final message toward Earth. Coordinates, recordings, everything they could. They didn't know if anyone would ever see it, but they sent it anyway. Hope was their last weapon. As the minutes passed, something strange happened. The alien ships began to move again, but not to attack. They were collecting pieces of the damaged Odyssey. Small drones flew out, scanning the wreckage, taking fragments of human technology. It was as if they were curious about the ship they had just destroyed. A cold curiosity. They didn't speak. They didn't respond. They just took. The captain watched quietly, his fists clenched. There was no anger in his voice, only sorrow. "They'll know what they did," he said softly. "Earth will know. Humanity will remember this." Outside, the last of the alien crafts drifted away, vanishing into the same nebula from which they had come. The Odyssey floated alone, silent, broken. A few sections still had life support. The survivors gathered in the central chamber, their faces lit by the soft blue glow of emergency lights. No one cried. There was only silence, the kind that feels heavier than sound. Far away, the signal kept traveling through space, untouched, unstoppable. It carried images of the attack, the faces of the crew, the sound of their final words. It carried proof of what had happened, proof that humanity had reached for peace and had been met with violence. It would take 22 minutes to reach Earth, but when it did, everything would change. Back on the ship, the captain looked out the shattered window. Stars shone cold and distant, reflecting off the cracked glass. He whispered almost to himself. "If they thought humans would forget this, they don't know us at all." His words faded into the hum of dying machines. In the quiet that followed, the survivors held on to one another. They didn't know if rescue would ever come. They didn't know if anyone else in the galaxy would ever understand what had happened here. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. Earth would not stay silent. Humanity had always been slow to anger, but once awakened, it never rested until justice was done. The Odyssey drifted on, a scar across the stars, its broken hull shining faintly against the endless dark. Somewhere deep inside its memory core, the ship's systems kept recording, still sending out faint pulses of data, a heartbeat of hope, refusing to die, and far across the void, those 22 minutes were ticking away. Each second brought the message closer to Earth. Each heartbeat carried a warning to every world that would ever listen. Humanity may be kind, but it remembers. Always. The silence after the attack was haunting. The Odyssey floated quietly, surrounded by the remains of what had once been the pride of humanity. Fires flickered behind shattered panels. Oxygen hissed through small cracks, and the soft sound of dripping water echoed through the corridors where life once thrived. The stars outside looked distant and cold, as if the universe itself had turned away. Inside the ship, the survivors moved slowly through the dim light, their bodies weak, their hearts heavy. Every face carried the same expression, a mixture of disbelief and pain. They had come to explore, not to fight. They had spoken of peace, yet all they found was destruction. Every corner of the ship told the story of what had happened. Burned walls, broken consoles, the faint smell of smoke, it all felt unreal. No one spoke for a long time. There were no words that could fit inside that kind of silence. In the control room, the captain sat in front of the dark main screen. His uniform was torn and a streak of dried blood ran across his sleeve. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on the faint glow of the communication indicator. The distress signal had been sent. That thought gave him a small spark of strength. Earth knew. That meant hope wasn't completely gone. A few crew members joined him, quietly taking their places. They were exhausted but refused to rest. One of them checked the oxygen levels, barely enough for 2 days. The water supply was contaminated and most of the ship's systems were beyond repair. Still, they worked because that's what humans do when all else fails. They try to survive. Hours passed in slow motion. The surviving crew began collecting data from the damaged systems. They wanted to record everything: the attack pattern, the alien symbols, the damage reports, anything that could help Earth understand what had happened. Their movements were steady but filled with pain. Every screen they fixed showed them faces they had lost. Every piece of data reminded them of the lives that had been taken in the blink of an eye. At one point, they heard something, a faint noise coming through the main communication line, static. Then a whisper, too broken to understand. They thought it might be Earth responding, but the signal was too weak. It came and went like a ghost. Still, that small sound reminded them that they weren't completely alone in the universe. Someone, somewhere might be listening. Meanwhile, deep in the shadows of the ship, the repair teams worked to stabilize the power core. The temperature had dropped dangerously low. Every breath came out as a faint mist. They wrapped themselves in emergency blankets and kept working, their hands trembling from both cold and exhaustion. The captain checked on them through the comm link. His voice was steady, but his eyes told another story. He was afraid that time was running out. Then came a moment that none of them would ever forget. As the Odyssey drifted slowly past the edge of the nebula, the alien ships returned. Only this time, they didn't attack. They hovered at a distance, their lights pulsing faintly like glowing eyes watching from the dark. The crew froze, staring at the radar. The captain's jaw tightened. "They're not done with us," he murmured. The alien crafts didn't move closer. They seemed to be scanning, observing, almost as if they were studying the wreckage. The survivors felt anger rising inside them. These attackers had destroyed their ship, taken their friends, and now stood there calmly watching what was left. One engineer slammed his fist against the console. "Why are they doing this?" he shouted. No one had an answer. The captain finally broke the silence. "Record everything," he said. "If they want to watch, then they'll also be seen. Earth will know every second of this." His words brought a strange kind of courage to the room. The humans couldn't fight back, but they could still bear witness. Their story would not vanish into the void. Hours passed. The alien ships eventually faded back into the dark, leaving behind an emptiness that felt almost heavier than their presence. The crew began to prepare for what came next. They couldn't repair the ship. The damage was too great. So they decided to gather all remaining energy into the communication system. If they couldn't make it home, at least their story would. They gathered in the central chamber, sitting close together under the flickering lights. The captain stood among them, tired but proud. "If this is where our journey ends," he said softly, "let it end with purpose. Earth will hear us. They'll know what happened here." His words were calm, steady, filled with quiet strength. No one cried, but their eyes shimmered with emotion. They weren't ready to die, but they were ready to face whatever came. Each crew member recorded a short message. Some spoke about their families, some about their dreams for humanity, and some about the beauty they had seen beyond the stars. Their voices were filled with love and courage, not fear. They wanted Earth to remember not just how they died, but why they went, to learn, to explore, to build peace. It was the human spirit in its purest form. Once the messages were complete, the captain connected them to the main transmission. The ship's antenna extended one final time, glowing faintly against the cold darkness. The system counted down, and with a low hum, the Odyssey released its final signal into the void. It carried their data, their recordings, and their last words toward Earth. The ship's lights dimmed once more after the transmission ended. The power reserves dropped to almost nothing. For a while, the crew sat in silence. There was a sense of peace in that moment, as if they had finally done all they could. Some closed their eyes, resting against the cold metal walls. Others stared out the window at the stars. Despite everything, there was still beauty out there, calm, endless, and full of mystery. One of the scientists whispered, "Maybe one day someone will find this place and know what happened." Another replied quietly, "They will, because Earth never forgets." Meanwhile, far away, the message continued to travel through space. It crossed the empty distances between stars, moving faster than anyone could imagine. It carried truth, pain, and something even stronger: resolve. Every pulse of data was like a heartbeat saying, "We are still here." Back on the Odyssey, life support began to fail. The lights flickered weaker and the air felt thinner. The captain ordered everyone to move to the inner chamber, where a small backup system could keep them alive for a few more hours. As they gathered, they talked. Not about fear or anger, but about home. They shared stories of oceans, mountains, and laughter. They spoke of sunlight, of rain, of the smell of the earth after a storm. For a moment, the cold metal ship felt warm again. The captain looked at each of them and said, "If anyone survives this, tell the world what you saw. Tell them we came in peace." His voice trembled slightly on the last word. Everyone nodded, their faces lit by the faint glow of the emergency light. They didn't know if anyone would survive, but his words gave them a reason to keep breathing. Outside, the last traces of the alien fleet disappeared into the dark. The Odyssey was left drifting alone once again. Inside, the crew stayed close, keeping each other awake, fighting sleep that felt too final. Every sound became sharper. The hum of the power core, the soft clatter of loose metal, the rhythm of heartbeats in the quiet. Then something unexpected happened. A soft, distant tone echoed through the ship. A signal, but not one of their own. The communication officer quickly checked the instruments. The screen lit up faintly with a repeating pattern. It wasn't alien. It was human. The transmission was weak, distorted, but it was there. It meant Earth had heard them. The distress signal had reached home. Tears welled in tired eyes. For the first time since the attack, hope returned, not loud or wild, but gentle and steady. They had been heard. Help might come. The captain smiled faintly, the first real smile in hours. They know, he whispered. Earth knows. The crew clung to that thought as the power finally began to fade completely. The last lights flickered, then dimmed into darkness. The Odyssey floated silently, its faint signal still pulsing through the stars, a heartbeat that refused to stop. Far away, on a small blue planet glowing under sunlight, the transmission arrived. It played across global networks, showing the world the truth of what had happened. Every nation, every home, every person saw the same thing. The faces of brave explorers who had reached for peace and were met with destruction. The message ended with the captain's final words, "We came in peace." That single sentence shook the world. People didn't speak. They didn't move. They just watched in silence as the screen faded to black. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The Odyssey's crew couldn't see it, but their message had done more than reach Earth. It had awakened something deep inside humanity. The same unity that had built the Odyssey was now turning into something stronger, something unbreakable. And somewhere, drifting in the endless dark, the remains of the Odyssey kept floating, quiet and proud, carrying the spirit of its crew, a silent reminder that humanity may bend, but it never breaks. When the signal from the Odyssey finally reached Earth, it was midnight in some countries, morning in others, but time didn't matter anymore. The moment it appeared on global networks, everything stopped. The usual noise of the world, traffic, laughter, politics, business, all faded into silence. Billions of people watched as the transmission began. The first image showed the Odyssey floating in the dark, its white hull marked with burns and cracks. The video shook slightly as if the person recording it was trembling. Then came the voice of the captain, calm but tired. "If anyone hears this, we came in peace." Those 6 words cut through the hearts of everyone watching. The footage continued, showing short clips of the crew, their smiles, their laughter, and then their fear as the attack began. The camera caught flashes of light, bursts of fire, alarm screaming, and the sound of people shouting orders. It showed everything, the first strike, the damage, and the moment they realized they wouldn't make it home. The final part of the transmission showed the crew sitting together under dim lights, speaking softly to the camera. Their faces were bruised, their eyes hollow, but there was no anger in them, only sadness and courage. The captain's last words were clear. "Tell our families we tried. Tell Earth to remember." Then the screen went dark. For a long time, no one moved. People in homes, schools, cafes, and control centers sat frozen. News anchors couldn't speak. Soldiers stood still in their bases. Scientists covered their mouths with shaking hands. Parents held their children closer. Humanity had seen many tragedies, but this felt different. This wasn't a storm or an accident. This was an attack on everything Earth believed in: hope, peace, exploration. It was an attack on humanity itself. Within an hour, every major city across the world lit up. The global networks replayed the video again and again. Social media filled with one message repeated by millions. They attacked our own. Governments called emergency meetings. Leaders who hadn't spoken to each other in years connected through secured lines. Old rivalries faded instantly. For once, there was no us or them. There was only we, humanity. At the United Earth Council building, the atmosphere was tense but united. Scientists confirmed the coordinates from the signal, proving that the Odyssey had been far beyond the solar boundary. Military analysts studied the alien crafts frame by frame, identifying their movement patterns and energy readings. They didn't recognize the technology. It was far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. Yet the look in everyone's eyes was not fear. It was determination. The world's top engineers were called in from every nation. Space agencies, once competitors, now worked side by side. Within hours, a message was drafted to send back into deep space. It was simple: Humanity received your message. We remember. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Across the planet, something began to change. The same factories that once built satellites and space stations started retooling. Massive shipyards lit up along the coasts, glowing through the night. On the moon, robotic arms worked without rest, welding together the first frames of new vessels. The project was named Retribution, but it wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting what humanity had built, making sure no other explorer would ever face what the Odyssey did. The people of Earth came together in a way history had never seen. Scientists designed engines faster than any before. Engineers created armor that could survive a star's heat. Children wrote messages to the lost crew, sending them into orbit as small satellites that blinked like candles in the night sky. The world had grieved, but grief had turned into strength. Still, amid all this work, a heavy sadness hung in the air. People kept rewatching the final video, memorizing the faces of the crew. Their calm voices before the end reminded everyone what they had stood for: peace, knowledge, and unity. That was why, even in their anger, humanity refused to lose its humanity. The mission was not to destroy. It was to make sure the universe understood that Earth would defend its own, but never become the monster it faced. Months passed. The project grew faster than anyone believed possible. The world's brightest minds worked day and night, driven by purpose rather than power. In one of the largest hangars ever built, a new ship stood under construction. It was far larger than the Odyssey, sleek, dark, and covered in plates of reflective metal that shimmered like water. Its name was kept secret at first, but soon everyone called it the Guardian. It wasn't just a ship, it was a message written in steel. You can hurt us once, but never again. Every test, every system, every small success was broadcast live. The world watched and cheered together. Children wore shirts with the emblem of the Odyssey, streets filled with posters showing the words "for them." Humanity had found a new rhythm. Hope had returned, not as a whisper, but as a roar. Meanwhile, the scientists continued decoding the alien symbols captured in the transmission. It wasn't easy. The language was complex and emotional, filled with patterns instead of words. After months of study, they discovered something chilling. The aliens had called humanity's ship a violation. To them, the Odyssey had entered a forbidden space, something sacred. That didn't justify the attack, but it revealed a truth. Humanity wasn't hated, just misunderstood. Still, misunderstanding or not, what was done couldn't be undone. The captain's words replayed again and again on every channel. Tell Earth to remember. And Earth did. Every nation built memorials for the Odyssey's crew. Statues of explorers reaching for the stars rose across continents. People left flowers at their bases not out of pity, but out of respect. They became symbols of unity. Ordinary humans who had faced the unknown and refused to bow down. As Project Retribution continued, leaders made one clear rule: humanity would not strike blindly. They would not become conquerors. They would act only when they knew the truth of what had happened. Still, the fleets had to be ready. Every day, new ships were launched into orbit, their silver bodies reflecting the sunrise. Crews trained endlessly, learning teamwork, discipline, and calm under pressure. They were explorers first, warriors second, but ready for either role. Then one day, deep in the command center, an operator detected something unusual: a faint energy signature at the same coordinates where the Odyssey had disappeared. It wasn't natural. It was the same pattern that had pulsed through the ship's first encounter, the alien signal. It had returned. Scientists and generals gathered around the screen, watching the signal repeat every 47 seconds. The same rhythm, the same warning. This time, humanity didn't run. Within hours, Earth's orbital network lit up. The Guardian and several smaller ships powered their engines, preparing for launch. Across every continent, people watched the skies, just as they had when the Odyssey had left. This time, though, there was no nervous excitement. There was quiet strength. People whispered to each other, "For the Odyssey." The phrase spread like a wave. Every pilot, every engineer, every child knew what it meant. As the countdown began, the world held its breath. The Guardian's engines ignited, sending waves of blue light through the clouds. The ground shook, not from fear, but from power. The ship rose slowly, then faster, breaking through the atmosphere. Cameras followed it as it turned toward the stars, leaving behind a glowing trail. It wasn't just a launch, it was a declaration. In command centers, world leaders watched silently. They didn't cheer this time. Their faces were serious, respectful. They knew what was at stake. Humanity was stepping beyond the solar system again, not out of curiosity, but because it had to. The crew aboard the Guardian carried more than weapons. They carried the memories of those who came before them. They carried humanity's promise to never be silent in the face of injustice. As the ship disappeared into the darkness, Earth's skies returned to peace. Children pointed upward, whispering prayers and promises. Families looked to the stars and felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: faith in each other. Humanity had faced something impossible and had chosen not to break. Days later, a new message was broadcast from Earth to the stars. It was short, spoken in one calm, clear voice. "We sought peace. You gave us pain. Now we bring understanding and warning. Never harm those who come in peace again." The transmission was sent on every frequency, every channel, across every known system. It wasn't a threat. It was a truth. Humanity would always reach for peace first, but if peace was rejected, if kindness was met with cruelty, the universe would learn what it meant when Earth stood together. In the months that followed, the stars above Earth seemed different, brighter somehow, closer. People began to believe that the Odyssey's spirit still traveled with the Guardian, guiding it through the dark. And somewhere far beyond the reach of light, the remains of the Odyssey drifted quietly, carrying the memory of a crew that had sparked the greatest unity humanity had ever known. The galaxy had seen humanity's kindness. Soon it would see its strength. The Guardian moved through the endless dark like a silent storm, carrying the weight of a world's hope. Its crew didn't speak much during the long journey. Everyone had watched the video of the Odyssey. Everyone had seen how brave those explorers were in their final hours. No one needed reminders. Every heartbeat, every command, every breath inside that ship was guided by one purpose: to find the truth and bring their people peace of mind. The days turned into weeks, and the blackness outside the ship's windows stayed the same. Sometimes the crew gathered near the observation deck to stare at the stars. They looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. It was hard to believe that somewhere out there, beyond all that beauty, existed a species that had killed without warning. Still, no one spoke of revenge. The crew wasn't here to destroy. They were here to make sure the universe remembered that humanity would never again allow its explorers to die alone. The captain often stood quietly near the front console, watching the endless space ahead. He didn't look like a man preparing for war. He looked like someone carrying a promise he refused to break. The officers around him followed every order with sharp precision. Every small movement felt important. Every sound of the ship's engines felt like a heartbeat echoing from Earth. As the Guardian moved closer to the last known location of the Odyssey, the readings began to change. Strange energy signals appeared on the scanners. The same pattern that had destroyed the first ship was repeating, only this time stronger, closer, alive. The crew stared at the readings in silence. There was no panic, only focus. Humanity had prepared for this. They had studied those signals, decoded their rhythm, and learned how to fight them. The captain gave one calm command: "Hold position. Observe first." The ship slowed to a near stop, its hull gleaming softly under the distant light of a dying star. The sensors picked up movement ahead, massive structures floating in space shaped like twisted rings and glowing with a blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was a city in the void, built from crystal and metal, far beyond anything humans had seen before. The alien civilization wasn't primitive. It was powerful, old, and alive. Everyone watched the view in silence. For the first time, humanity saw the face of the ones who had attacked them, not in pictures but in their creations. The city was beautiful in a strange way. Towers reached into nothingness and great ships moved between them like drifting shadows. The sight filled the crew with both awe and grief. This was the civilization that had decided humans didn't belong among the stars. The captain gave his next order softly: "Send the message." A signal was transmitted across space, peaceful, clear, respectful. It contained everything humanity wanted to say: that they came to understand, not to fight, that they wanted no more loss. The signal was written in both human language and the alien patterns that scientists had carefully decoded. It was a message of peace spoken by the same voice that had ended the transmission months ago. "We seek understanding, not conflict." The message went out. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The silence was heavy. Then the alien response came, fast, bright, and deafening. Energy beams cut through the darkness, striking just ahead of the Guardian. The alarms blared through the ship. It wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. The same kind of warning that had destroyed the Odyssey, but this time Earth's ship didn't fall apart. The shields held. The lights flickered, but the structure stayed strong. Humanity had learned. The captain didn't shout. His voice was calm. They've made their choice. Hold formation. The crew worked in unison, activating the defense systems and preparing to respond, not to destroy, but to survive. The alien ships began to move closer. They were larger than anything built on Earth, glowing like fireflies against the darkness. They surrounded the Guardian, forming a circle just like they had done with the Odyssey. For a moment it seemed history was about to repeat itself, but then the Guardian's lights brightened, its engines pulsing like a giant heartbeat. "Send second transmission," the captain said. This time the message wasn't a plea. It was a statement. "We are not here to invade. We are here to remember our fallen and to warn you never again." The message played on open frequency. Across the alien fleet, a ripple of movement appeared. Some of their ships paused. Others held their weapons steady. No one fired. The silence stretched. Inside the Guardian, everyone waited. The sensors showed that the alien city was powering up a massive energy field. Something huge, possibly a weapon or a defense barrier. The crew exchanged worried looks. They knew what that could mean. Yet, before any command was given, something unexpected happened. A small ship, much smaller than the others, broke from the alien formation and moved toward the Guardian. It didn't fire. Instead, it blinked lights in a rhythmic pattern. 3 short flashes, 2 long, 1 short. The same pattern the Odyssey had sent before it died. Everyone in the control room froze. It wasn't random. It was a message, a response. Someone or something on the alien side remembered the signal from the humans they had destroyed. The captain gave the order to open a communication channel. Static filled the room, then a strange deep voice spoke in broken tones. "You return. You bring light to forbidden place." The translator struggled to interpret the sounds, but the meaning was clear enough. The alien still believed this region of space was sacred, untouchable by outsiders. The Odyssey had entered it by accident, and they had destroyed it out of fear or duty, not hatred. The captain replied calmly, "We did not mean to invade. We came in peace then, and we come in peace now." For a long moment there was no answer. The alien ship remained still, its lights flickering uncertainly. Then the voice returned. "Your kind, brave. Many regret. We feared your fire." Those words sent a chill through the crew. The aliens had not been angry, they had been afraid. Humanity's technology, its daring to cross into deep space, had frightened them. The attack had been a desperate attempt to protect what they didn't understand. The captain took a deep breath. "Fear ends here. We only wanted to explore, to learn. We remember our dead and we wish for no more." The alien voice grew softer. "You speak with truth." The others, not all agreed. Suddenly alarms sounded again. More alien ships appeared on the sensors, new ones, larger and faster. These were different, marked with red light instead of blue. They didn't stop or send messages. They charged straight toward the Guardian. The first wave fired energy beams that shook the ship violently. The crew struggled to stabilize the systems. "Return fire," someone shouted. The Guardian's weapons came alive, firing precise bursts that pushed the attackers back without destroying them. It was a warning shot, not an act of vengeance. The aliens didn't expect restraint. They hesitated, pulling back for a moment. The captain stood firm. "We will not be the monsters they think we are," he said. "But we will defend our own." The next few hours were tense. The battle wasn't one of chaos, it was a struggle for understanding. The Guardian held its position, refusing to advance but also refusing to retreat. The first group of aliens, the ones who had sent the peaceful signal, began transmitting again. They sent data, proof of the original misunderstanding and information showing that their species was divided. Some wanted peace, others saw humans as a threat. The captain made his decision. "Send everything to Earth," he ordered. The truth had to be known by all, not hidden or twisted. The crew worked quickly, transmitting the entire communication record back through the long-range array. Then the captain gave one final message to the alien fleet. "We forgive, but we will not forget. If you ever see our ships again, Know that they come in peace, but also know they will not fall as the Odyssey did. The alien ship with blue lights blinked again, this time slower, like a bow. Then, one by one, their vessels powered down their weapons. The larger red-marked ships stopped firing as if unsure what to do next. The humans didn't fire again. For the first time in this part of the galaxy, silence returned. After several long hours, the alien ships began to withdraw. The Guardian floated alone, surrounded by wreckage and starlight. Inside, the crew looked at one another, not in triumph, but in quiet relief. The battle hadn't been about victory. It had been about proving something greater, that even when humanity was pushed, it could still choose to be better. Back on Earth, when the transmission finally arrived, billions watched once again. They saw the alien ships, the strange lights, the exchange of messages, and the final peace that followed. The world breathed as one. People cried, not from anger this time, but from pride. The Odyssey had been lost, but its memory had built something beautiful. Courage with compassion. The captain of the Guardian sent one final message home before cutting the transmission. Mission complete. We found truth. We found peace. The stars are not our enemies, they're just waiting to understand us. The message ended there, but its meaning spread across every corner of Earth. Humanity had learned something that day. That power wasn't in weapons or technology, but in how people chose to use them. The Guardian continued its journey, not as a ship of war, but as a bridge between worlds. The galaxy had seen humanity's wrath before, but now it had seen something far stronger, their heart. Months had passed since the Guardian's last transmission from the edge of alien space. Earth had received the message about peace, the proof of misunderstanding, and the captain's calm words before the channel went silent. Since then, the world waited. The skies had become a place of hope and worry both. People would step outside at night, look up, and whisper small prayers into the wind, as if somehow their voices could travel through the stars and reach the crew who carried humanity's promise. The silence wasn't empty, though. It was filled with change. The nations of Earth had learned to work together, not out of fear, but out of a shared sense of purpose. The events surrounding the Odyssey and the Guardian had left a mark deeper than any war ever could. The world that once argued over borders now spoke the same words. We are one species. Governments formed new alliances not for power but for exploration, knowledge, and peace. The Odyssey Memorial, a giant structure that reached into the clouds, stood as a symbol of that unity. Its surface was engraved with the names of every person who had ever risked their life for discovery. In schools, children studied the stories of both ships. Teachers told them how the Odyssey had gone too far and paid the price, and how the Guardian had gone farther still and returned peace to the stars. Kids would draw pictures of spaceships with the Earth flag shining brightly on their sides. It wasn't just history. It had become part of humanity's identity. Then, one night, when the world had almost accepted that the Guardian might never return, something happened. At the Global Space Command Center, alarms began to ring softly, not out of danger but detection. A faint signal appeared on the monitors coming from deep space. It was weak, fading, but unmistakably human. The technicians leaned closer, their eyes wide with disbelief. The signal carried a familiar rhythm, a series of tones used only by the Guardian. Within minutes, the message was decoded. The voice that came through was rough, tired, but alive. This is the Guardian. Mission accomplished. Returning home. Those words spread faster than light itself. Within hours, every corner of the Earth knew. People poured into the streets, cheering, crying, shouting with joy. Bells rang. Fireworks lit up the skies, and even those who had no one on the ship felt as if a family member was coming home. Humanity had waited for this moment with both fear and hope, and now, at last, the stars were sending their heroes back. Weeks later, telescopes caught sight of the ship. The Guardian appeared like a moving star, glowing faintly as it entered the solar system. It looked different now. The once dark hull was marked with burns and dents, evidence of the journey it had survived. Yet it still moved with grace and strength, like a giant returning from a long voyage. As it neared Earth, thousands of smaller ships launched to greet it. Scout crafts, satellites, drones, all guiding it home. When the Guardian entered orbit, the world stopped again, just like it had when the Odyssey's last message was received. This time, though, there were no tears of pain, only tears of pride. Every major city turned its lights off so people could see the ship crossing the night sky. It moved slowly, almost humbly, as if it knew it was being watched by billions. The landing was scheduled at the largest space dock ever built, a structure designed for the return of humanity's greatest vessel. As the Guardian touched down, the engines released a deep, echoing sound that rolled across the plains like thunder. The ship's ramp lowered, and for a moment no one moved. Then the captain stepped out, followed by the crew, each one walking slowly, their faces tired but calm. The crowd that had gathered erupted in applause. Flags waved, people shouted, and music played through the loudspeakers. It was the sound of the world welcoming its protectors home. The captain didn't make a long speech. He simply said, "We went to find peace, and we found it." His voice carried across the open field, clear and warm. Then he added, "They were not monsters. They were afraid, just like us. We showed them what humanity truly is." Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. It was as if the entire planet took a deep breath and finally let go of the fear it had carried for years. Later, as the crew shared their experiences, people listened with awe. They spoke of the alien world, its strange beauty, its people who shone like moving light, and the conversations that had slowly broken the walls of mistrust. They told stories of how one misunderstanding had caused tragedy, but patience and honesty had turned it into something greater. Humanity had taught the aliens something powerful, that courage and kindness could exist together. In the following months, messages began to flow between the two worlds. The aliens, now known by a name meaning Children of the Veil, sent symbols of peace, small orbs that glowed with their energy, each one pulsing like a heartbeat. Humanity responded with gifts of art, music, and stories. It wasn't trade or politics. It was something simpler and purer, a bridge of understanding built by those who had once faced each other in fear. The Guardian was repaired but never sent on another mission. Instead, it was placed in orbit as a monument. People could visit it one day to walk through its corridors and see the places where history had changed. Inside, there was a quiet room with a single window looking out into space. The captain had requested it remain untouched, a place for reflection. On the wall, engraved in metal, were 6 words: "Peace is earned, not given freely." Life on Earth moved forward, but it was not the same world anymore. Technology advanced faster, but so did humanity's sense of purpose. Instead of racing to build weapons, nations competed to build schools, research centers, and exploration vessels. The dream of the stars was no longer a distant idea, it was a shared goal. The captain often visited the Odyssey Memorial. He would stand quietly before the names of the lost explorers, sometimes speaking softly as if talking to them. "You started this," he would say. "You showed us who we could be." Many times, visitors would see him there, never surrounded by guards, just a man standing before history. Years later, when new explorers prepared to leave Earth for the first joint mission with the Children of the Veil, the world watched once more. The new ships were built using both human and alien technology. They looked different, sleeker, brighter, and faster, but they carried the same symbol on their hulls, the emblem of the Odyssey surrounded by the words, "In peace, we travel." The day of launch arrived. The captain of the Guardian, now older, watched from the viewing platform. When asked what he felt, he smiled faintly and said, "Pride, not in what we built, but in who we became." The engines roared to life, and the new fleet rose into the sky. This time there was no fear, no division, no anger, only unity and hope. As the ships vanished into the stars, children waved. Adults stood in silence, and the old wept quietly. The moment felt like the completion of a promise. The same promise the Odyssey had made. The same one the Guardian had kept, that humanity would always reach beyond fear to find connection. Back at the memorial, as the night settled in, the lights across the structure began to glow softly. The names of the Odyssey's crew shimmered under the starlight. For a brief second, one could almost imagine their voices in the wind whispering with gentle pride. The captain looked up at the sky one last time and whispered, "They know now. The universe knows who we are." Above him, the stars shone brighter than ever, as if they were listening. That night across Earth, people felt something deep within their hearts, a sense of belonging not just to one planet but to something much greater. Humanity had faced the darkest corners of space and had come back not with hatred, but with wisdom. The fear of the unknown had turned into friendship. The memory of loss had become a guide for generations to come. The story of the Odyssey and the Guardian became a reminder for all time that courage means more than fighting, that strength means more than power, and that peace once found must be protected by all. And so, as the years passed and the stars grew closer with each new ship that left Earth's orbit, humanity never forgot the words that started it all. Mess with humanity's vessel? You brought this on yourselves. It was no longer said in anger but in pride, a statement of what it meant to stand for something greater than survival. It meant standing for peace, for unity, and for the unbreakable spirit of humankind. Even in the quiet darkness of space, that spirit would forever shine.